Boys and girls, this is Chapter 5, Part 2 of Where the Red Fern Grows. The sheriff raised me into a sitting position. His friendly, deep voice said, "Are you all right, son?" I opened my eyes. There was a smile on his wide, rugged face. In a choking voice, I said, "Yes, sir, I'm all right." He helped me to my feet. His big hands started brushing the dust from my clothes. "Those kids are pretty tough, son," he said, "but they're really not that bad. They'll grow up someday." "The sheriff," I said, "I wouldn't have fought them, but they pulled my pup's ears." He looked over to my sack. One pup had worked its way almost out through the hole. The other one's head and two little paws were sticking out. Both of them were whimpering. A smile spread all over the big sheriff's face. "So that's what started the fight," he said. Walking over, he knelt down and started petting the pups. "They're fine-looking dogs," he said. "Where did you get them?" I told him that I had ordered them from Kentucky. "Well, what did they cost you, son?" he asked. $40, I said. He asked if my father had bought them for me. I said, "No, I bought them myself." He asked where I got the money. "I worked and saved it," I said. "Well, it takes a long time to save $40, he said. "Yes, sir," I said. "It took me 2 years." "2 years!" he exclaimed. I saw an outraged look come over the sheriff's face. Reaching up, he pushed his hat back. He glanced up and down the street, and I heard him mutter, "There's not a one in that bunch with that kind of grit." Picking up my sack, I said, "Thanks for helping me out. I guess I'd better be headed home." He asked where I lived. I said, "Up the river a way." "Well, you got time for a bottle of pop before you go, haven't you?" I started to say no, but looking at his big, friendly smile, I smiled back and said, "Well, I guess I have." Walking into the general store, the sheriff went over to a large red box and pulled back the lid. He asked what kind I wanted. I'd never had a bottle of pop in my life, and I didn't know what to say. Seeing my hesitation, he said, "The strawberry looks pretty good." I said that would be fine with me. The cool pop felt wonderful to my hot, dry throat. My dark little world had brightened up again. I had my pups, and I had found a wonderful friend. I knew that the stories I had heard about lawmen were not true. Never again would I be scared when I saw one. Back out on the street, I shook hands with the sheriff, saying as I did, "If you're ever up in my part of the woods, come over and see me. You can find our place by asking at my grandfather's store." "Sure," he asked. "Why, the only store upriver is about 30 miles from here." "Yes," I said, "that's my grandpa's place." He asked if I walked here. "Yes," I said. "You won't make it tonight," he said, "will you?" "No," I said. "I intend to camp out somewhere." I saw he was bothered. "I'll be all right," I said. "I'm not scared of the mountains." He looked at me and at my pups. Taking off his hat, he scratched his head. Chuckling deep down in his barrel-like chest, he said, "Yes, I guess you'll be all right. Well, goodbye and good luck. If you're ever in town again, look me up." Far down the street, I looked back. The sheriff was still standing there where I left him. He waved his hand and I waved back. On the outskirts of town, I stopped and picked up a can and all of my provisions. I hadn't gone far before I realized I had undertaken a very hard job. The sack became heavier and heavier. For a while my pups cried and whimpered. They had long since pulled their heads back in the sack. I would peek in at them every once in a while. They were doing all right, curled up into two little round balls on my bundles. They were fast asleep. Deep in the heart of the Sparrow Hawk Mountains, night overtook me. There in a cave with a stream close by, I put up for the night. Taking my pups and bundles from the gunny sack, I used it to gather leaves to make us a bed. My pups followed me on every trip, whimpering and crying, tumbling and falling over the sticks and rocks. After the bed was made, I built a fire. In a can of water from the mountain stream, I boiled 3 eggs. Next, I boiled half of the remaining salt pork. Cutting the meat into small pieces, I fed it to my pups. Each of us had a piece of candy for dessert. My pups enjoyed the candy. With their needle-sharp teeth, they gnawed and worked with it until it was melted away. While they were busy playing, I dragged up several large timbers and built a fire which would last for hours. In a short time, the cave grew warm and comfortable from the heat. The leaves were soft and felt good to my tired body and my sore feet. As I lay stretched out, my pups crawled all over me. I played with them. They would waddle up and down to the front of the cave, look at the fire, and come back scampering to roll and play in the soft leaves. I noticed the boy dog was much larger than the girl dog. He was deeper red in color. His chest was broad and solid. His puppy muscles nodded and rippled under the velvety skin. He was different in every way. He would go closer to the fire. I saw right away that he was bold and aggressive. Once he went around the fire and ventured out into the darkness. I waited to see if he would come back. He came wobbling back to the mouth of the cave, but he hesitated there. He made several attempts to come back, but the flames were leaping higher by the minute. The space between the fire and the wall of the cave was much hotter than when he had ventured out. Whimpering and crying, he kept trying to get around the fire. I said not a word. I just watched. Puppy though he was, he did something which brought a smile to my face. Getting as close as he could to the side of the cave, he turned his rear to the fire. Hopping sideways, yipping at every jump, he made it through the heat and sailed into the pile of leaves. He had had enough. Curling up in a ball close to me, he went to sleep. The girl pup was small and timid. Her legs and body were short. Her head was small and delicate. She must have been the runt in the litter. I didn't have to look twice to see what she had lacked in power. She made up with her brains. She was a much smarter dog than the boy dog, more sure of herself, more cautious. I knew when the trail became tough, she would be the one to unravel it. I knew I had a wonderful combination in my dogs. I had not only the power, but the brains to go along with it. I was a tired boy. My legs were stiff and my feet were sore, and they were throbbing. My shoulders were red and raw from the weight of the sack. I covered my pups up in the leaves and moved my body as close to them as I could. I knew as night wore on and the fire died down, the chill would come. Tired but happy, I fell asleep. Along in the silent hours of the night, I was awakened. I opened my eyes but didn't move. I lay and listened, trying to figure out what it was that woke me. At first, I thought one of my pups had awakened me by moving and whimpering. I discarded this thought, for I could see that they were both fast asleep. I decided it was my imagination working. My fire had died down, leaving only a glowing red body of coals. The cave was dark and silent. Chill from the night had crept in. I was on the point of getting up to rebuild my fire when I heard what had awakened me. At first I thought it was a woman screaming, and I listened. My heart began to pound. I could feel the strain all over my body as my nerves grew tighter and tighter. It came closer. It screamed again. The high pitch of the scream shattered the silence of the quiet night. The sound seemed to be all around us. It screamed its way into the cave and rang like the blacksmith's anvil against the rock walls. My blood froze in my veins. I was terrified. Although I had never heard one, I knew what it was. It was the scream of a mountain lion. The big cat screamed again. Leaves boiled and stirred where my pups were. In the reflection of the glowing coals, I could see that one was sitting up. It was the boy dog. A leaf had become entangled in his fuzzy hair of the floppy ear. The ear flicked and the leaf dropped. Again the wicked scream rang out over the mountains. Leaves flew as my pup left his bed. I jumped up and tried to call him back. Reaching the mouth of the cave, he stopped, raising his small red head high in the air. He bawled his challenge to the devil cat. His bark must have scared him as much as it startled me. The boy pup came running back. The tiny hairs on his back were standing on end. My father had told me that lions were scared of fire. I started throwing on more wood. I was glad I had dragged up a good supply while making camp. Hearing a noise from the bed, I looked back. The girl pup, hearing the combination, had gotten up and joined the boy dog. They were sitting side by side with their bodies stiff and rigid. Their little beady eyes bored into the darkness beyond the cave. The moist tips of their little black noses wiggled and twisted as if trying to catch a scent. Boys and girls, this is a good place for me to stop for part 2. We will start again in just a minute with part 3. See you in a minute.